Good evening and welcome to the Monday, August 16th Speedway Redevelopment Commission meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Prior to the meeting, the agenda and time and place were publicly posted in accordance with state law. We'll begin the meeting with introductions. To my left is our Vice President, Jennifer Miller. To her left is the Secretary, Rhonda Schwartz. To her left is Member Barry Gardner. And to his left is the Speedway School Liaison, Dr. Terry Reed. In the audience, we've got Eder Lopez, the Executive Assistant. And to my right is the Executive Director, Tim Gropp.
Good evening.
We do have a quorum, and we will proceed with our meeting. I'd like to begin with public comment. If anybody would like to step to the podium and address the commission. All right.
And I received none via email.
Very good. Moving forward, we will proceed to the consent of the previous regular session's meeting minutes for July 19th, 2021. So were previously distributed. Were there any edits, any changes, corrections?
Doesn't reference this. This is probably the best ran meeting all year. Was the July meeting.
So it's very well ran, without a doubt.
I wanted to note that. You don't have to put that in the minutes.
Efficient and effective, yes. We'll make a footnote. Hearing no additional changes, we'll proceed with consent. Approval by consent. Moving on to the next item, the approval of claims. Mr. Gropp, would you go through the claims for us?
Yeah. The couple things to point out. One, we actually had, I don't know if you saw it on the budget versus actual, but we actually had some income. So, you know, the amount of claims, that doesn't happen very often. So that also says we have not been paid for the use of our lot from May from IMS, so I followed back up with that to get that invoice paid as well. Let you know when we get that in. Besides that, pretty straightforward, other than I'll mention, I mentioned at the last meeting this one, so we have a couple expenses related to Eder. As you know, we've switched that. This will be the last time these show up. All the proper approvals at the council level have been taken care of now, and that'll shift over. So that should clean that up, that section up as well. The notary and the things like that are related to getting Eder to become a notary, which is very valuable to the town, and everything else is pretty straightforward.
See Wolpert on there. Are they getting any closer on completion of the fire station study? Yeah,
so they are. We're just doing final analysis of a few sites, and we're supposed to have kind of a preliminary update to make sure everything's in order, and then we plan on having probably a joint session with council and SRC to go through the report. So look for that to get scheduled real soon, actually. So we're trying to push to get that done.
Very good. Any questions about the claims as submitted? I'll entertain a motion to approve the claims as submitted.
Mr. President, I make a motion that we approve the claims as submitted.
I'll second.
With a motion and a second, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of approving the claims as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? No. All good. And no abstentions. Motion passes 4-0. Moving on to the next item, the director's report.
Well, I was going to give you an update about the Wolpert study, but you beat me to it. So.
I appreciate that.
I had a feeling
Nothing
that was
else. Yeah, so we'll try to get that done hopefully in the next month. A couple other things I want to get scheduled here. We've been talking about getting just kind of our next planning session put together. There's a lot on the table right now, so we're starting a few of our projects that we have already teed up, so we'll get through that and then we'll circle back on the next steps. So look for that meeting as well, and then also kind of revisiting the Lenore property that we purchased as well, and kind of moving that forward now that we're able to have public meetings. And we'll monitor that situation as well. Besides that, 1300 block, so spent a lot of time on that last week. Thank you for getting everything signed. We had a couple hiccups getting to closing of the construction loan, but worked through those. It was all related to a previous environmental restrictive covenant that was getting cleared up, but didn't quite get done by closing date through items. So we figured all that out. Everything got signed and filed Friday evening, and everything got switched. So we're moving forward. The first surprise of the project was all the sand you might see piled up there today. That is actually related to the environmental cleanup. That's just the gift that keeps on giving. That was actually the backfill of when they remediated. Well, that doesn't compact for the parking lot, so we had our first change order of removing all that sand and changing it out with fillable, compactable material. So hopefully that's the worst we come across. We have a meeting tomorrow on site to kind of go through some final infrastructure. We had them go back and look at a few infrastructure items, and we're going to meet on site and go through those and finalize those details. And don't anticipate any issues there. And then it'll just be full force ahead on construction. So for the public's purpose, just understand there's probably going to be some limited lane closure, or at least right-of-way closure on the sidewalk during construction periods, mostly for safety reasons. There will be a couple times when they're doing steel that they need to close the parking and maybe a little bit of lane. We'll make sure we try to communicate that ahead of time, just so they can get a crane in there to lift the steel. And beyond that, hopefully it will be a minimal impact, and they'll move forward and everything will be great. So that project's great. Everything's still moving on Crew Car Wash, and we'll hopefully have an announcement on another project later this week out at Founders Square. I do want to note, it came up in council, and I know it's been brought up here as well. We're still getting information about the 25th Street backup and the turn lane. I think it's gotten better. I think there were some issues that we had to work out with Indianapolis. I understand that you're still only getting about 3 cars through in the left-hand turn. I just want to kind of set that expectation. You're not going to get many more on a left-hand turn from there. So it's better than a stop sign, but it's not going to be 6 or 7 cars because there's nowhere to stack them in the turn. So, and some of it's also just being a courteous driver. So if you have somebody who pulls into the middle of the lane and it's already stacked back, and then we miss a chunk of the light, it's going to affect it. So try to keep the intersection clear. It's only going to get busier when we have left-hand turns coming out of Founders Square as well. We're going to continue to look at the light and try to make adjustments accordingly, but I just don't want there to be an expectation that it's going to be a really long turn light, because unfortunately, because that's so close to the Crawfordsville and High School intersection, there's only so much we can do to stack cars there without creating a traffic jam of our own. So we'll continue to work on it and appreciate the feedback, but I just wanted to get that out there as well. And then we'll talk about 10th and Cossell here in a few minutes. And then the last one is just kind of where we're at on the Wilshaw project. It's my favorite topic. But we are hopefully getting a path forward here. So at our last meeting, we obviously voted to move forward with any means necessary. I will tell you that we are ready to shift directions at any time very quickly. So if need be. However, we did get a positive update last week from the debt financing option. We had, since February, we have talked about holding off. Once we file a lawsuit, that's kind of the direction you're going to go. So we had some options with a debt financing route that we wanted to explore that they were looking at, as well as an equity firm that came in. We've kind of looked at the equity firm. I don't think that's going to work at this time, but the debt equity had originally given us a timeline, and it was dragging on. So last week we checked in with them, and some of the obstacles, I've said it many times, this project's complicated on many levels, just a lot of people involved, a lot of liens from different groups, different investors, a lot of parties. So They informed me that they had worked through some of that. Doing the due diligence took longer than normal. They looked at the project from many different angles and found the best route to move forward. They believe they've packaged it and they're at a point where they're ready to move forward with the ratings, the bond ratings for the package. So from that point, not knowing exactly timelines here, I don't have exact timelines, but basically the ratings will take 30 to 40 days maybe. I'm looking at Barry. So you probably know more.
Yeah, I mean, from start to finish, usually it's from the time you'll get it scheduled to your actual meeting, and then they're usually a week or two to get you back on your actual official rating.
Yep, so that kind of is where that financing option's sitting. After that, it's just a matter of setting a closing date once the rating comes back. So that was positive news. They felt confident in the rating. They felt that they've done their due diligence. All that being said, if we went a different path, a legal path, that basically cuts that off at the knees and ends that option. So from a how do we move forward the quickest, most efficient to get the project back on track, I think it's prudent that we stay the course and work through this with some parameters. We've asked for some additional information from the developer. We've asked for our attorneys to be able to review loan documents. We've working on scheduling weekly calls again as we used to make sure we're keeping up with timelines that we can report effectively. And if at any time we feel that the process is derailed here, we can always, like I said, switch directions quickly if need be. But we don't want to do something that would jeopardize what I believe to be the most efficient path to getting people back on site and construction. So we understand the frustration. I get a lot of calls, a lot of comments on this, and I just remind people that, you know, if we went a legal path, that's the start of a long clock, both financially and timeline-wise, and it doesn't actually get us to a resolution where somebody's back on site doing something on the site. So we'll follow this through as we have been since the beginning. We'll report back any relevant information, and as soon as we can get some timelines back to everybody, we will do so. You know, once we get to closing, if everything goes smooth at that point, there's a short hold period, cool down period, if you will, and then it'll be a fact of looking at the timeline and when Wilhelm could get back on site and remobilize. So we're going to follow that path until it looks like that path is dead end, but hopefully if everything comes together, we can get this all finalized sometime this fall. With that.
Any questions? Appreciate the report. Moving on to new business. The encroachment license at 1426 Main Street parking lot.
So this is very similar to an encroachment license, a more permanent encroachment. We have an encroachment license for Main Street, just back myself up here, that is an annual encroachment license to put, because the town owns the sidewalk up to the buildings, there's an encroachment license that provides insurance and allows businesses to put outdoor seating and whatnot out there. So Dawson's on Main has done more of a permanent license. They're going to be adding on kind of a permanent seating area and had entered into a kind of a permanent encroachment license with the town of Speedway. We are reconfiguring 1426 Main Street here. By doing that, we're left with about a 10-foot section that really doesn't have any purpose to it, and Barbecue and Bourbon had approached us about possibly utilizing that for additional outdoor seating. So we have basically taken the template of the encroachment license that we use with Dawson's and shifted it to the SRC to allow them to utilize that area. It is blocked by concrete planters to provide a buffer between the parking area and where this would be. And this license, they pay a fee, an annual fee for them to utilize this chunk of that lot. So with that, I do have this under legal review, so we could approve it pending any legal notes that might come up. if the SRC so desires.
Any questions in regards to the encroachment license? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the encroachment license.
I'll make a motion to approve the encroachment license for 1426 Main Street parking lot.
I'll second.
With a motion and a second, we'll take a vote on approving the encroachment license for 1426 Main Street. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say the same. And motion passes 4-0.
Just a quick note, it is a revocable license at any time, so if something did change, we'd just give them notice and be able to take it back as well.
That concludes the new business. Moving on to old business, 10th and Cossell Improvements.
Yeah, Sean, you want to come up? So we are at a point where we are ready to move forward with the SRC's approval with our improvements to 10th Cossell. Sean Strange from First Group Engineering and Mike Koyak, hi Mike, are here to kind of just go through what we've landed on, some of the obstacles we ran into, and then make sure that the SRC is okay for us to move forward in the bidding process. Good. Bill, can you bring up the drawings? Thank you.
Okay, I'll just start by saying thanks for having me here tonight. I'm Sean Strange from First Group Engineering. This process has been pretty enlightening in working with you all at the Town of Speedway, with Allison Transmissions, with AES, and bearing of their facilities out there. So I think it's all kind of worked together in a cog-driven system. So we have pretty much been able to finalize the plans, given now that Duke is in the process of relocating or burying most of their lines out there. So, and we pretty much have a design that we think you guys will appreciate. It's under budget right now. We're seeing higher estimates right now as we come back from COVID, although I'm hoping we're now moving into a time of year where we can usually get a little more competitive bids. So thinking is, of course, in the next month or two to bid these traffic items out and hopefully give somebody some winter work that they can competitively bid it. So that being said, I think so far we're under budget by about 30 or 40,000 at this point. And the town is in the middle of procuring the light poles as we speak, and that's considered in the cost. So we have, for right now, basically put together the design for the lighting and the signals. And Tim, have you talked much about the Duke, or not Duke?
AES.
Yeah, AES. I want to say Duke for some odd
AES
reason.
Indiana.
So AES Indiana, or old IPL, is burying out there. However, there is a section that they're not burying just east of Cossell, and that is due to fire suppression systems that they have. Basically, it's too busy on the south side of the road, so they had to go back up. So when we looked at the lighting design, that ended up eliminating at least 2 luminaires out there. So that's what's helping us stay under budget for right now. So
Just a quick review of what the project is. So obviously, Allison Transmission has built their new innovation center. Part of that includes decorative fence along 10th Street, new sidewalks. In conjunction with that, they're actually picking up the tab to bury a majority of the power lines in front of the new, especially in front of the new building, but then as far down towards Main Street east as they can. They have, what Sean's referencing is our original intent was to bury the lines all the way to Main Street, so there would be no more power lines from essentially the Mug and Bun down through Main Street. However, due to the way AES works with they won't go in the right-of-way. They want a 10-foot easement behind the right-of-way. And Allison Transmission has their own fire suppression system that happens to be sitting right in the way, so there's nowhere for them to bury the line. So just east of 10th and Cossell, they'll come back up. So we are not obviously going to be replacing decorative poles because we'd be in the power lines. So that kind of shrunk the scope of the project. Our role was to put decorative lighting similar to Main Street, 10th Street, and what we did out in Founders Square, as well as upgrade the intersection poles of that area. So there you go.
That's it in a nutshell. So yeah, the poles basically, as shown there on this last sheet right here, are the typical Valmont that you guys have used. So we always, one of the things we like to do is at least at this stage, show what we're thinking about what's going on out there as far as the design specs, how it's going to look. So we're also looking at signing the intersection as well as where we're putting in all the push buttons and all the signage and whatnot. Now this particular design is a what's called a span catenary and tether system. So we did look at an armed cantilevered system, but that was simply too expensive for budget. So those tend to get quite pricey, and there's quite a few utilities on the south side of the intersection that can make that rather difficult. So the design we have now is a little less intrusive, more cost-effective way of putting in. And the fluted design of the poles, it's the black powder finish, is fairly nice looking. We are moving the cabinet to the northeast corner of the intersection, out of Allison's corner of the intersection there, and Duke is pushing their power lines underground south of the sidewalk ramps on the south side of the intersection to stay out of that. So
Bill, could you bring up there we go. Yeah, there's a lot to coordinate here.
That's a lighting schematic kind of showing where the wiring's going in at. We have the proposed right-of-way that Allison is deeding to the town as part of 10th Street's improvements. And some of the line work you see on there is something I have just sketched up as to what it might look like if we added a left turn lane there at 10th and Cossell, so that we know that we're staying outside of the limits of that construction. So we're trying to place all these facilities outside of any future widening. And we have been in talks with the city about trying to get this funded in a future plan, and they're definitely interested in this location. So I think the accident history as well as the congestion here probably gives this area a fairly good recommendation as far as improvements go. So can you forward to the next sheet? Let me see. Yeah, that's the signal plan. So again, you see the proposed roadway on the south side, and of course it's not part of our project. We're just simply drawing it in to kind of show how we're trying to squeeze everything in. There are these little keys down here. This is where AES is going in at. This is where they're burying their facilities right now. So we're trying to stay north of them, give us a little bit of space with their high voltage underground lines. And then of course the new signal configuration will pretty much mimic what's out there right now, but it'll be easy to expand in the future to add left turn lane, left turn arrows. So with that being said, we're pretty close to throwing together the final bid documents, bid specs and everything, and advertising it for bidders. So I guess that's the next step, is to move that direction. So
if the SRC is comfortable with what we've drawn up and everything, then we're just asking for approval to move forward with the bid process to kind of stay as close to the timelines of AES as possible. So we were a little ahead of them, now we're a little behind them. So we just want to keep the process moving if this is what the expectation from the SRC is in this project.
Good. Sean, thank you for presenting. Does anybody have any questions?
I have one. When you say you're taking into any future considerations on that road, would that include if that road was ever widened by the city down the road?
Yes, for left turn lanes.
Just for, okay.
So there's a transition from basically a 4 to a 5 lane section that I have in there, and most of that transition has to occur on the south side. There's not much room on the north side to do that. So,
right.
But it is There's not much queuing necessary needed there, but there is just enough gap space in there to get a nice, a couple cars in there for a left turn in the future, so.
There's not enough room, there's not enough room for a 4-lane or something in there, but if we're going to set poles, let's not have to set them and then move them again. So we set them with the idea that you could add a left turn lane north onto, was that Auburn? And then a left turn lane south onto Cossell. So with probably four or five car stacking.
Yeah, it's probably about 4 or 5 cars.
Just to alleviate, so you don't just stop an entire lane of traffic for a left-hand turn. So we'd be able, if Indianapolis came back in and said, we're going to add those, they don't have to do anything other than add the lanes and swap out the heads of the traffic lights and be done.
I have 2 questions. One for Sean. I noticed on your estimate there were a few items of the scope that were left out.
Okay.
Is that there a reason for those, the pavement, the marking, and the ramp construction?
Oh, the pavement markings, when my designer kind of threw everything together, the pavement markings were a small item that he usually throws into contingencies. Right now, since we're so far below with his contingency, I've actually marked up the contingency, and pavement markings are part of it. So usually on a project like this, we're probably going to use thermoplastic pavement markings out there. So you're looking at a few $1,000s just for those items, and that should be it. So.
Okay. And then a question for Tim. So is there, is there a reason that we have to stick to the schedule, that we're trying to stick to the schedule if we think that prices could come down next spring or something, anything like that?
The only big issue we're running into, I guess I couldn't call it a big issue, is right now the lighting on 10th Street is on AES poles, and there's going to be a gap from those poles no longer being there, so we're going to have to come up with a temporary lighting solution in the interim. I don't know that we've figured that out yet. So the quicker we can get the decorative poles up, the quicker we'll have lighting. And also, I know that, I don't know particularly what Allison is, but they're pushing pretty hard because I think they're trying to get to a grand opening of their facility as well. But so we're just trying to line all that up.
Okay.
But that's kind of the timeline reason.
Any additional questions? Hearing no additional questions, I'll entertain a motion to vote on the proceeding to bid with the 10th and Cossell Improvements.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to proceed, to proceed with the bids for 10th and Cossell Improvements.
I'll second.
Hearing a motion and a second, I'd like to vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say the same. Motion passes 4-0. And the next item of old business is the 1426 Main Street parking lot construction schedule and restrictions.
Yeah, and I'm kind of lumping in the 16th Street project as well, the parking lot. So Globe Asphalt, who won the bid, is ready to move. They actually wanted to go last week, and I reminded them it was race week, so we can't do that. But they're ready to go. We have a pre-con tomorrow at 1426. That being said, I just wanted to put this on here so we relay to the public that, again, there's going to be some traffic restrictions on Main Street during that construction. In particular, part of the project is we're removing the bricks in that area and replacing it with stamped concrete. As you know, those bricks are kind of collapsing and not even, so this will stabilize it and keep the same look, but make it more useful. So, but to do that, they're going to have to close probably a lane of Main Street during that construction period, and then we'll have to close parking while it cures. So I just wanted to get that out there that starting next week, Cheryl will definitely be putting out information, but understand there's going to be a few days where we're going to have some lane restrictions. We'll have flaggers out there. It'll probably be one lane. We'll try to minimize the time to either early morning or times when it's not main eating times for restaurants, but just wanted that to be aware, and then we'll try to get that project as quick as possible. So The main issues will be when they're doing the brick paver replacement, and then also on 16th Street, parking lot, the big issue there is we haven't completed the land swap yet. We're getting there. It's in process, but we need to work with IMS this week to get the proper approvals for the pipeline easement that we need to get on. So we're trying to coordinate that and get that wrapped up. But they are anxious to squeeze our projects in between other projects. So we're trying our best to accommodate that. So that's all I had.
Thanks for the update. That concludes old business. Are there any additional questions or comments this evening from any of the members? All right. Our next meeting will be Monday, September 20th at 6 p.m. right back here. We will adjourn the meeting with consent.